Hi, this is Hayden. I'm doing my week 6 gender pay gap in sports video or discussion post, whatever you want to call it. So basically, what I found for the differences between men's and women's sports, and why that the gender pay gap, might exist, um, is for a multitude of reasons. And for this specific assignment, I know gender pay gap exists in soccer as well. I chose to mostly focus on basketball. It's something I'm more familiar with, and I think it can kind of be extrapolated to that as well. So I came up with 4 basic points: the competition level and the differences between the sports, general sexism in society, gender roles, and how each of these things perpetuates itself and has perpetuated itself throughout history to kind of create this chicken or egg situation. So the first thing is the game itself, the competition level. So start off with some basic differences. In 2019, NBA teams average anywhere from 103 points a game to 118 points a game, whereas adjusted for minutes because WNBA plays less minutes, 85 points per game to 107. And really, fans like more offense generally. So this might be a small reason or a big reason why someone may choose to watch the NBA over the WNBA. Like I mentioned earlier, NBA plays 48 minutes while the WNBA plays 40. They both play 4 quarters. It's just slightly shorter for the WNBA, and I think that might take away some viewership from them if a fan was looking forward to watching more basketball. But that's just a minor difference there. The 3-point percentage is higher in the NBA, ranging anywhere from 33% to roughly 38%, whereas the WNBA is 29 to 36.7. And because the 3-point shot has become such a big part of the game of basketball today, I think having a higher 3-point percentage and being able to watch more threes actually go in the basket might be a conscious or subconscious factor for someone choosing to watch the NBA over the WNBA. Also, the NBA has an 82-game season. Usually, this year it was a little bit shorter just because of COVID, but it's usually 82 games. WNBA season's 34 games, and I think that fans really enjoy kind of the ebb and flow of the season in the NBA. For the WNBA, you kind of, 34 games, it's not a lot. It's kind of weird that you'd play 15 games and almost be halfway done with the season. I don't know why they do this. They probably have a good reason, but I do know that it makes it become a little less motivated to follow the sport and your team if you're only playing 34 games. Another point is that dunks are really prevalent in the NBA on social media pages, on Instagram, team pages, all that kind of stuff. You'll see dunks frequently. It's a really exciting play in basketball, whether it's a dunk or an alley-oop, any stuff like that. That's what draws in a lot of people into the game of basketball, watching their favorite players do dunks, the dunk contest, really stuff like that is a really attractive part of basketball. It's part of why the popularity of basketball grew in the first place. The NBA WNBA, rarely has dunks, so that probably takes away some of its viewership, because a lot of the players aren't able to dunk because they're either not tall enough, don't have the athleticism, whatever it is. I mean, women on average are shorter, so a lot of the players are shorter, so it's just part of the game. NBA players are generally better than WNBA players, I would say. The competition level is generally higher. That's a common argument by a lot of people. They claim that, oh, well, they're just better. I don't want to watch, bad basketball, which isn't really true. But a lot of people, I guess, really find that they want to watch the highest level of basketball at all times. So I guess the NBA is better in that aspect. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but continuing on. Also, the WNBA was founded in 1996, so it hasn't really had a lot of time to gain that momentum as much as the NBA has, which was founded in 1946 and was really the first mainstream basketball league. So the WNBA really came in as a secondary option for people, so it really never had that chance. Whew. Kind of just breathe for a second, excuse me. All right, so some differences here in, I don't know if it's gender roles, general sexism. People don't, I guess, what I find a lot of the times in comment sections, stuff like that, I really find that people are like, oh, well, I don't want to watch, not the best players play, not the best sport play. But that's making a lot of assumptions on the ability of a woman that you probably never watched play sports before. I don't think it's really a fair assumption, And I think that there's good aspects to each of the games, and I don't think the games are so different, especially in soccer, and partially in basketball. Even in basketball, while dunks don't exist and all that stuff, um, I still think that it definitely is a fun game to watch. Still, all the aspects, or most of the aspects exist. 3-point shot, layup, assists, good rebounding, that all is there. Close games, buzzer beaters, all happens in WNBA as well. So there's no reason for it, really. I could understand seeing a slight gap between the NBA's revenue and WNBA revenue, but when you're looking at something like $7.46 billion that they've generated in 2019 versus $60 million for the WNBA, and when you look at something like the top salary in the NBA being Steph Curry at $40 million, and the top in the WNBA being Brittany Griner, and lastly, looking at the percent of revenue that WNBA players get from the total revenue of, like, as their salary, as they get from the total revenue of the WNBA, it's 20%. For NBA players, it's 50%. So even proportionally, it doesn't quite make sense. And you look at the gap in revenue here, it's 100-1. That doesn't really make sense at all. The WNBA is still a pretty entertaining league. Doesn't really make sense to me. And going to soccer for a second, you've mentioned this, and I've seen it in other people's videos as well. The women's soccer team is a lot better, comparatively, looking at like the relative skill levels in their respective, I guess, divisions. They're much better. They're consistently finished better than the men's team, but they still get paid less. It doesn't really make logical sense, but really, I think it comes down to historic gender roles, looking at what a man is supposed to do, what a woman's supposed to do, and when you grow up, you see, men playing sports. So that's what you envision in your head as the prototypical athlete. So when you look to watch sports, that's what you're looking for, and that's what I want to go into. Perpetuation of itself. So all these things, seeing the males as athletes and playing sports, and seeing these dunks and looking at that's what basketball is. And looking at women's sports and seeing like older people like kind of laughing at it, saying that it's a joke, saying that the NBA has to bail out the WNBA every single year, which isn't really true. That kind of that you internalize that and you build that into your view of the women's sports in general, and it just continues this cycle, which is really harmful for the future of women's sports. And kind of going off that, even for women, if I were a woman and I had a chance to go to the WNBA, why would I? I have a chance to make way more money and not really be in the spotlight. I don't know if that's what someone wants, but the top salary right now is $113,000. I'm not saying that's not a lot of money, but when you look at like being a professional athlete, the work you have to do to get there, all the steps you have to take, all the training you have to do, all the camps you have to go to, going to college. And by the way, you have to be at least 22 to make it to the WNBA, and contracts aren't guaranteed when you get drafted, unlike the NBA. So you have to be kind of old. You really have to rely on sponsorships almost if you're like a mid-level player in the WNBA. So why would you go through all that work just to do that? So I think a lot of women are discouraged from doing it. I think there'd be a much higher competition level if the popularity was raised, and I think it would kind of bring itself out of its, I guess, funk, you could say. But yeah, that's basically what I think about the gender pay gap. I think it really just perpetuates itself. I think it got a 50-year late start to the game of basketball. I think it'd look much different if it also started in 1946. And really all these things are pretty trivial. Even the points I made on the side of saying, this is why it's more popular, I don't think that they're significant enough to create this 100-1 proportional gap in revenue. And I really don't understand the much lower proportion, being 20% of the revenue for players in the WNBA versus 50% in the NBA. I really don't understand that. It kind of disproves the revenue argument in general. But yeah, that's my view on it. And I hope I made some good points here. Thank you.